Hello, welcome to the continuation of the story of my relationship with ballet. A long and winding, lifelong love affair. So, the last time I told you how I got started and just sort of the early part of my training. So, if you didn't get a chance to see that, I'm going to try and put a link so that you can go back and sort of catch up if you like. But yes, at the end of the last video, I was telling you about my dancing with a dance group at school, and then I graduated and got my first job. One of the first things that I decided to do was to find myself a dance tutor, somebody who could teach me ballet. So I looked around until I found somebody, and my dance tutor was a former professional dancer. She had studied ballet as a young girl, so she had a foundation. However, she performed as a belly dancer in New York City for pretty much all of her adult life. And yeah, her name was Nancy. Hi, Nancy. She was amazing, amazing. And she taught me as much as she could in ballet, and she taught me the rudiments of belly dance and how to work a veil. And under her guidance, I performed at different shows, again, all around the island, but this time as a soloist. So more stage experience there. And I learned, it was good to learn how to manage stage fright, which is something that I battle with even to this day. Yeah, but this was very, very good experience. But it was a very interesting time in my life because soon after I graduated from secondary school, the volcano began to erupt on island, the Soufriere Hills volcano. It was a time of massive upheaval. There were multiple evacuations, mass immigration off island, and eventually the volcano did destroy many villages on island, and the capital, Plymouth, was also destroyed. So yeah, it was a very crazy, crazy time. And I remember, with all this ash falling all of the time, many times we would sweep the ash out of the way and get on with our practice, our rehearsal, our training, whatever we were doing. In retrospect, I think it was really good that I had something to distract me, a passion project to distract me from all the chaos that was happening all around me in my world. But I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned at that time, I can really love to perform once I manage my stage fright. And once I own my performance, I had some good experiences on the stage. So I know that there's a performer in me somewhere, and it comes out some of the time. After dancing with Nancy for a couple of years, it was time for me to choose a major and go to study at university. When the time came for me to choose a major, I never allowed myself to seriously consider the possibility of studying dance. In my environment at the time, I didn't think there would be a real possibility of a career in dance. I didn't feel like I would get support for it anyway. And yeah, I mean, this was before the internet. The environment was very different back then, and it didn't seem like a viable career path. And so I decided to study media instead, a little bit more practical. And I love telling stories, and I figured it would satisfy my artistic leanings. So I decided to pursue studies in media, which sort of led more into film and video production as I went on. But in retrospect, I think it was one of those times where you have to consider whether to follow your heart or follow your mind. And sometimes you don't have to listen to your heart, you know? I think I should have allowed myself to seriously consider the possibility of studying dance, because it turned out to be a lifelong passion for me, although I didn't know at that time that it would be. So off I went to start my first year of university in Boston. So yeah, that was fantastic. That was great. And in the summer, I took classes at a place called the Dance Complex. And at the Dance Complex, they offered a work-study program back then where you could volunteer in exchange for dance classes. And yeah, so I volunteered a lot. And I took a lot of dance classes. I was able to try many different styles of dance and see what I like. And it was my first chance to take a ballet class in a really equipped ballet studio. So that was a real treat for me. It was wonderful. And the following year, I transferred to Toronto, a university in Toronto. And for a variety of reasons, it was more difficult to take classes. I think part of it was that I had a lot of essays to write, and I was focused on my studies and getting good grades. But when I could, I took classes at the National Ballet of Canada, National Ballet of Canada downtown. And they had adult ballet classes there. But I know that there were many times when I was in the fine arts building at my university when I would look through the glass windows of the dance studios and just be looking with longing eyes and just wishing that I could be in there. But I was a little bit silly back then, and I set up this scenario in my mind, which was like a choice between the film studies that I was doing and dance. It was like I had to choose one or the other, but I didn't really. And I think looking back, that's a lesson that I take forward. You know, you don't have to be one thing. You could be more than one thing. You could be multiple things. You could have multiple interests, multiple passions, multiple lines of work. Initially, when I graduated, I was sort of torn between two worlds, Toronto and Montserrat. And eventually, I settled more in Montserrat and sort of just focused on starting a career in television and video production. So for a while, it was fun and stimulating for me. It was a good artistic challenge, and I got into making documentaries, and I built up my skill set. So that was great. After a few years of doing that, I saw the opportunity to travel to Martinique. Martinique is a French island, for those of you who are not familiar with it, in the Caribbean also. And my objective was to travel and learn French. It would be a chance for French immersion, because I'd always wanted to learn another language. And so that's what I did. I went to Martinique for 6 months. And as you could imagine, one of the first things that I did was to look for dance classes, look for opportunities to dance. I did find a dance class. But it turned out that my program was pretty intensive, and there were exams to pass. And I was also making a documentary on the side of my travel experience. So I couldn't do everything at once, and it turned out I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice again. So it didn't seem like a good investment of time to just take dance classes for a few months and then I would return to Montserrat where I couldn't take any more classes. So I decided to focus on the documentary making and my studies. And I didn't take any classes. But even though I made that decision for myself, it was my choice to do that. I resented the fact that I couldn't take the classes. And I envied those who were able to take the classes. And that's when I knew I still really want to dance. And I want to study ballet. And that's when it really sunk in that dance is more than a hobby to me. It's actually more like a part of who I am as a person, you know? And so it was a bit of a wake-up call. So I returned back to Montserrat, and the following year I decided that I was going to train myself in ballet the best way that I could. Now at this point the internet was more established and YouTube was a thing, you know. So I found a couple of dance conditioning videos and I used those to try to condition my body for ballet. Yeah, they were ballet conditioning videos. So I followed those videos for a year, practically every single day. Because I was enthusiastic, I was passionate, and I was determined, you know? So yeah, it turned out that that was not such a good idea after all, because after a year, I was fatigued. I had lost a lot of weight and I was sore all over every day. So I was burning out physically, and because of this physical exhaustion and the soreness, I think it affected my mental state and my thinking. And I began to feel disillusioned, and I began to question whether or not I could achieve my goals, whether it was a worthwhile pursuit. And I stopped. So the lesson that I learned from this, and I always remember that, is that you have to know your limits. You know, you can be passionate, you can be enthusiastic, all of that, but you have to know your limits and respect them. Yeah? If you want to bring out your best as a dancer. So I don't know whether it was a good thing that I stopped altogether or not. But the following year, I switched to belly dance. And I began to study belly dance seriously. And I loved it. I loved the feeling of the movement in my body. It's just very soft and feminine. And I was learning and I was getting better at it. But somewhere along the line, I don't know, I guess I was just missing ballet. You know, there's something about training in ballet or the style of ballet movement that I was missing. And so I decided to pick up my ballet training again. It's hard to get very good at two genres at the same time, especially since I was working full time. So I decided to focus on ballet again, and I used the ballet classes that I found on YouTube with Catherine Morgan and Lazy Dancer Tips. And I use those classes in rotation to teach myself. And I recorded myself practicing and corrected the mistakes as best as I could. I also found a few opportunities to travel overseas for a few months each time. So when I was in Calgary, I studied with Decidedly Jazz Dance Center. They offered adult ballet classes, so yeah, I took as many classes as I could. And when I was in Maryland, I studied with the Maryland Ballet. And to this day, that's one of my best ballet experiences. Um, there were supportive teachers there. There were other enthusiastic, passionate, dedicated adult ballet dance students. I felt I was developing a community, and I even had the opportunity to be a teacher's assistant over the summer. So it was just a really wonderful experience, and in many ways, it was sad to leave that behind. Okay, but I continued to train myself, and then by 2019, I was kind of antsy. I wanted to see more of the world, so I decided to further my education, and I I went to Montreal, which turned out to be relocating to Montreal. The pandemic began shortly after I arrived in Montreal. Of course, when I got to Montreal, I was very excited to find out what the dance scene offered here. But because of the pandemic, I I couldn't dance in person anymore, so also it was difficult to find anything that worked for me. Montreal is a French city, and although I understand a lot of French, more now than when I arrived, but a lot of the instruction in-person classes, even the classes are supposed to be bilingual, it was going over my head. It wasn't a very satisfying sort of experience studying ballet in French altogether. So anyway, the major thing was the pandemic, and like many others, I turned to the internet for a solution. And that's when I found Broche Ballet. Broche Ballet is an online dance school, dance studio. And yeah, I've been studying with Broche Ballet ever since. I have found tremendous value in the quality of the dance instruction that I received there, and the support and encouragement, and also the wide scope of resources available to help me to teach myself, and to learn the things I need to learn to progress. And so, I think I've been growing a lot. I've been learning, and my skill is increasing. The lessons that I learn most now, being in my 40s, sort of how to adjust to the changes that maturity brings, in my body and in my life. There are changes. It's just natural. And I adjust to them and learn how to balance my ballet training with my physical abilities and the demands of life at this stage. So, my dance journey, my ballet, my relationship with ballet, it's had all the phases that any love affair, I guess, could have. It began with a crush, and then the early exciting period of the relationship, and it's had its ons and offs, and then back on again. And I think at this point I am at a phase where it's more mature, more settled down, more predictable, but I wouldn't say it's more comfortable, because ballet is not really a comfortable art form. Okay. you you always are sort of on the verge of falling on your face, but I guess there's something about that I must like, because I still continue to do it. Yeah, so I have said a lot this time. I had a lot to say, and I hope that you see something to take away from the lessons that I have shared with you, whether you're starting, whether you're disillusioned for a moment, or whether you are like me in a more mature phase of your journey. All right, so that's the end of my story today, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.